Please don't take my baby away from me. I'm only asking for one more chance to get home. Emily Carter whispered the words so softly that no one around her heard them, but her 8-month-old son Noah seemed to feel every ounce of the fear in her voice. The baby's cry cut through the airplane cabin like a sudden alarm, turning conversations into uncomfortable silence and making dozens of eyes turn toward the young mother in the economy section. Emily tightened her arms around him, rocking gently in her seat while the dim blue lights of the overnight flight reflected against the tired circles beneath her eyes. She had been awake for almost 36 hours. Her last shift at the small diner had ended only a few hours before she rushed to the airport. The ticket from Chicago to Boston had cost nearly every dollar she had saved, but Noah needed to see a pediatric specialist, and waiting another month was not an option. Around her passenger's side, a woman across the aisle looked away. A businessman lowered his headphones and frowned. Emily noticed every reaction, even though she tried not to. She had become used to those looks. The looks that said she was too young, too poor, too much of a problem. She glanced down at Noah's tiny fingers holding onto her worn sweater and forced a small smile. "It's okay, sweetheart," she whispered. "Mommy's here." But inside, she wondered how much longer she could keep pretending everything was okay. 2 years earlier, Emily had imagined a completely different life. She had a steady job, a small apartment she was proud of, and dreams that seemed possible. Then Noah arrived and everything changed. His father disappeared before she could even finish decorating the nursery. No goodbye. No explanation. Just an empty space where support should have been. Emily never regretted choosing her son. Not once. But some nights after paying rent, buying groceries, and counting every dollar left in her account, she wondered if she was strong enough to carry everything alone. The flight attendant approached with a polite but concerned expression. "Ma'am, is there anything you can do? Some passengers are trying to rest." Emily's cheeks warmed. Instantly. "I'm sorry. I really am trying." Her voice almost broke. She looked down at Noah, who was becoming more restless with every passing second. She considered standing up and walking to the back of the plane, but her legs felt heavy, and exhaustion was pulling her under. That was when a calm voice beside her interrupted the tension. "Excuse me, would you mind if I tried something?" Emily turned and saw the man sitting by the window seat next to her. She had barely noticed him before. He wore a simple dark jacket, but everything about him suggested quiet confidence. His voice was gentle, not annoyed. His eyes held something she hadn't seen from anyone else that night. Patience. "I have some experience with babies," he said with a small smile. "My sister has 3 children. Sometimes they just need a different pair of arms." Emily hesitated. Every instinct told her to be careful. She had learned to protect herself and Noah from disappointment. But as her baby cried against her shoulder, she realized she was running out of options. Slowly she nodded. "Okay," she whispered. "Just for a moment." The stranger carefully took Noah into his arms. And then something unexpected happened. The crying softened. The little boy who had been fighting sleep for nearly an hour became calm within seconds. The entire row seemed to fall silent. Emily stared at the man holding her son, confused by the peaceful scene in front of her. She didn't know his name. She didn't know his story. She only knew that for the first time in weeks, someone had looked at her not as a burden, but as a person. And she had no idea that the stranger sitting beside her was about to change her life forever. The airplane slowly settled into a peaceful rhythm, as the engine noise blended with the quiet breathing of sleeping passengers. For Emily Carter, it was the first calm moment she had experienced in days. She watched Noah resting comfortably in the stranger's arms, his tiny hand wrapped around the edge of the man's jacket as if he had known him for years. It was a sight Emily never expected to see. A man she had never met was holding her son with a patience and tenderness that made her chest feel strangely heavy. "I do not understand how you did that," Emily whispered. The man looked down at Noah and smiled softly. "Sometimes babies do not need a solution. Sometimes they just need someone to remind them they are safe." The word stayed with her. Safe. It was a simple word, but one Emily had not felt in a long time. She carefully reached out and touched Noah's little hand. "Thank you," she said. "I was starting to think everyone on this plane hated us." The man looked surprised. Why would they? Emily gave a small, tired laugh. Because people see a crying baby and they see a problem. They do not see the mother who has not slept. They do not see someone trying her best. For a moment he said nothing. He simply looked out the airplane window at the endless darkness outside. People are often quick to judge what they do not understand, he finally replied. His voice carried a quiet sadness that made Emily wonder about him. You sound like you have learned that lesson yourself, she said. A faint smile appeared on his face. Maybe I have. Emily noticed the way he answered. He was polite, but there was something hidden behind his words. Like there were chapters of his life he did not share with strangers. I am Emily, by the way, she said. Emily Carter. He shifted slightly while keeping Noah comfortable. Alexander. Nice to meet you, Alexander. She smiled for the first time that night. I am sorry my son interrupted your flight. He did not interrupt anything. Alexander glanced at Noah. He actually made this flight more memorable. Emily looked down at her simple clothes, the old diaper bag beside her, and the small bottle of water she had saved from the airport. I am sure this is not what you expected when you booked your seat. Alexander looked around the economy cabin and smiled slightly. Actually, I chose this seat. Emily raised an eyebrow. You chose economy? Sometimes it is easier to see the world when you are not separated from it. She studied him carefully. His calm voice, his expensive-looking watch, and the way other passengers occasionally glanced in his direction made her curious. But she did not ask. She had spent enough time around people who wanted to know her struggles without truly caring about her. Alexander was different. He did not ask how much money she had. He did not ask why she was traveling alone with a baby. He simply sat beside her and helped. After a few quiet minutes, Noah finally fell asleep completely. Emily carefully took him back into her arms. You are good with children, she said. Alexander looked away for a moment. I used to think I was. There was something about the sadness in that sentence that made Emily pause. Before she could ask what he meant, the cabin lights brightened slightly as the flight attendant announced their estimated arrival time. Neither of them knew that this simple conversation between two strangers was only the beginning. Emily thought she had met a kind man on a difficult night. She did not know the person sitting beside her was someone whose name appeared on buildings across the country. And Alexander did not know that the exhausted mother beside him was about to remind him of something he had almost forgotten how to feel. The first rays of morning light began to appear through the airplane window as the city below slowly came into view. Emily Carter looked down at Noah sleeping peacefully against her chest, still amazed by how different the world felt compared to just a few hours earlier. When she boarded the flight, she had felt completely alone. Now, sitting beside a stranger who had shown her unexpected kindness, she felt like she could finally breathe again. Alexander sat quietly beside her, looking out the window as if the clouds held memories only he could see. There was something unusual about him. He was not the kind of person who filled silence because he was uncomfortable with it. He seemed comfortable simply being present. Emily noticed small details she had ignored before. The expensive watch on his wrist, the perfectly tailored jacket, the confidence in the way he carried himself. He was clearly not an ordinary traveler. Can I ask you something? Emily said softly. Alexander turned toward her. Of course. Why did you help me? The question seemed simple, but it made him pause. Because you needed help. Emily smiled faintly. Most people would say that, but they do not always mean it. Alexander looked at Noah for a moment before answering. Maybe I needed the reminder that small things matter. Emily studied his expression. There was no arrogance in his words. No desire to be praised. Just honesty. You know. 3 days passed after the flight, but Emily Carter still found herself thinking about the stranger who had helped her during the hardest night she could remember. Life did not suddenly become easier. The bills were still waiting. The small apartment still felt too quiet after Noah fell asleep. The laundry still piled up faster than she could manage. But something inside Emily had changed. For a few minutes on that airplane, someone had reminded her that she was more than a tired mother trying to survive. She was a person worth noticing. That morning, Emily stood in her kitchen holding a cup of coffee that had already gone cold. Noah sat in his high chair, playing with a small toy while sunlight came through the apartment window. She smiled at him. "You know, buddy, you made quite an impression on that man." Noah laughed, unaware of the meaning behind her words. Emily had no way of knowing that across the country, Alexander Hayes was also thinking about that same moment. In the glass office tower of Hayes Innovations, Alexander stood before a wall of windows overlooking downtown Boston. Below him, thousands of people moved through the city, each carrying their own stories that he would never know. His assistant placed a folder on his desk. "The quarterly reports are ready, Mr. Hayes." Alexander nodded but did not immediately open it. His attention was somewhere else. "Is there something else?" his assistant asked. Alexander looked back at the city. "No. Just thinking." It was unusual. Alexander Hayes was known for making decisions quickly. His schedule was planned down to the minute. Meetings, negotiations, strategy, numbers. Everything had a place. Everything had a purpose. But a simple conversation with a struggling mother on an airplane had stayed with him longer than any business deal. He remembered Emily's words. "You saw me. Not my situation. Not my problems. Me." Those words bothered him because they were true. For years, people had seen his name before they saw him. They saw the company, the wealth, the success. Very few people saw the person behind it. Meanwhile, Emily was preparing for another long day. She packed Noah's bag and checked her bank account before leaving the apartment. The number on the screen made her pause. She had enough for groceries but barely. She took a deep breath and closed the application. Worry would not solve anything. She had learned that a long time ago. At the bus stop, she held Noah close while waiting in the morning cold. She watched other parents walk by, some rushing to work, some laughing with their children. For a moment, she wondered what it would feel like to have someone beside her. Not someone to rescue her, just someone who understood. Across town, Alexander received a message from his assistant. The airline had returned a personal item that had been found after his flight. Inside the package was a small handwritten note from a passenger who had accidentally left something behind. Alexander opened the envelope, expecting a routine message. Instead, he found a familiar name. Emily Carter. The note was not for him. It was attached to a forgotten document from the airline. But seeing her name again made him stop. He remembered the exhausted mother with the kind eyes. The woman who apologized for taking up space in a world that had already asked too much of her. Alexander looked at the note for a long moment. He had spent years building a company that reached millions of people. Yet one conversation with one person had affected him more than he wanted to admit. He picked up his phone and called his assistant. "I need you to help me find something." There was a brief silence. "What would you like me to find, Mr. Hayes?" Alexander looked at Emily's name one more time. A way to make sure she gets the support she deserves. He did not know where this connection would lead. He did not know that Emily's past was connected to a part of his company he had never investigated. And he certainly did not know that the woman he met by chance would soon reveal a truth that would change the way he saw his entire world. Alexander Hayes had spent years believing that every problem had a logical solution. Numbers could be calculated. Risks could be measured. Mistakes could be corrected. But as he sat alone in his office that afternoon, staring at the name Emily Carter on a simple document, he realized there was one thing his success had never taught him how to handle: human stories. He had asked his assistant to look into Emily's situation, not because he wanted to interfere, but because something about her struggle felt familiar. Not her circumstances, not her financial difficulties, something deeper. The feeling of carrying a responsibility alone. The next morning, Alexander received a report on his desk. It was brief. Emily Carter, 27 years old, former marketing assistant, excellent performance record, left her previous position 18 months ago, current employment, part-time server at a family restaurant, single mother, one child. Alexander read the information slowly. The words were simple, but behind every line was a person trying to survive. He looked at the employment history again. "She worked for us?" he asked. His assistant nodded. "Yes, Mr. Hayes. She was with one of our partner companies before she resigned." Alexander frowned slightly. Why did she leave? His assistant checked the notes. The official reason was personal circumstances after the birth of her son. Alexander leaned back in his chair. Official reasons were often the easiest explanations. They rarely told the entire story. "Can you find out more?" he asked. "Not private details. Just understand what happened professionally." Later that day, Emily was finishing her shift at the restaurant. The lunch crowd had finally disappeared, leaving behind the quiet sounds of dishes being cleaned and chairs being arranged. She checked her phone and saw a message from her landlord reminding her about the upcoming payment date. She closed her eyes for a moment. Another reminder. Another responsibility. Then she looked at Noah's picture on her phone and smiled. Everything she did had a reason. Everything was for him. That evening, while preparing dinner in her small apartment, Emily noticed something unusual. An envelope had been placed near her door. She picked it up carefully. Inside was a letter from a community support program connected to a company she recognized. Hayes Innovations. Her heart immediately became cautious. She read the letter twice. It was not a donation. It was not charity. It was information about a new program offering professional opportunities for parents returning to the workforce. Emily had no idea why she had received it. She had not applied. She had not contacted anyone. Across town, Alexander sat in another meeting, listening to executives discuss expansion plans. Normally, he would have been focused completely, but his thoughts kept returning to Emily. One of the executives mentioned employee retention problems among new parents, and Alexander immediately noticed something. "How many qualified employees leave after having children?" he asked. The room became quiet. No one expected the question. "We do not have the exact number available right now," someone replied. Alexander looked around the table. "Find it." For years, he had focused on growing the company. Bigger buildings, bigger investments, bigger achievements. But he had overlooked the people who helped build everything. A few days later, Emily received another message. This time it was not an automated letter. It was a personal invitation for an interview opportunity. She stared at the screen confused. She had no idea who had opened this door for her. She only knew one thing. Someone had noticed. Someone had remembered that behind every resume was a real person with a real life. And somewhere inside the world of one of America's most powerful CEOs, a simple encounter on an airplane had started changing more than just one woman's future. Emily Carter stared at the invitation on her phone for almost 10 minutes before she finally pressed the reply button. The message was simple. "We would like to invite you for an interview with Hayes Innovations." She had read it so many times that the words almost stopped making sense. A company like Hayes Innovations did not usually notice people like her. People with outdated work clothes. People who carried diaper bags into interviews. People who had to check their bank account before buying a cup of coffee. The next morning, Emily stood in front of the mirror in her small apartment, adjusting the only professional outfit she still owned. Noah sat on the floor nearby, playing with his favorite blue blanket. "Mommy is just going to try, okay?" she whispered with a smile. "No matter what happens, we will be okay." She did not know that across the city, Alexander Hayes was reviewing the same information about her. But this time he was not looking at numbers. He was looking at a person. The interview room at Hayes Innovations was exactly what Emily expected and feared. Glass walls. Modern furniture. Employees walking quickly with confidence she wished she had. For a moment she felt like she did not belong there. Then she remembered the airplane. She remembered the moment someone looked at her and saw more than her struggles. She took a breath and walked inside. The interviewer smiled politely. "Emily Carter?" "Yes. Thank you for coming. We reviewed your previous work history. Your experience is actually quite impressive." Emily looked surprised. "I thought I would need to explain why I left." The interviewer paused. "We would like to understand, if you are comfortable sharing." Emily lowered her eyes for a moment. She had told that story many times. Usually people heard it as an excuse. She explained that after Noah was born, she needed time away from her career. She explained that she tried to return, but opportunities became harder to find. She explained that being a mother had changed her priorities, but not her ability. The interviewer listened carefully. No judgment. No uncomfortable expression. Just attention. Later that afternoon, Alexander watched the interview notes from his office. He had not expected to feel so invested in the outcome. He had met thousands of employees during his career. He had reviewed countless applications. But Emily was different. She reminded him that behind every difficult choice was a story people rarely took time to understand. When the final decision was made, Emily received an offer. Not a special favor. Not a gift. A real opportunity based on her skills. The position would allow flexible hours so she could care for Noah while rebuilding her career. She sat on the edge of her bed after reading the message, holding her phone with both hands. Tears filled her eyes, but this time they were not from exhaustion. They were from relief. For the first time in a long time, someone had opened a door without asking her to prove that she deserved to walk through it. That evening, Emily returned to the place where everything had started. She looked at Noah sleeping peacefully and thought about the stranger on the airplane. She still did not understand why he had helped her. She did not know that Alexander Hayes was the reason this opportunity had reached her. And she did not know that soon, she would walk into the same building where he worked and discover that the kind man from the flight was not just a stranger. He was the person who had quietly changed the direction of her life. Emily Carter walked into Hayes Innovations for her first official day, with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. The building was exactly how she remembered it from the interview. Tall glass windows, bright open spaces, people moving with confidence as if they belonged there. But this time she was not standing outside wondering if she was good enough. This time she had a place inside. She carried her laptop bag in one hand and Noah's small picture tucked inside her wallet. A reminder of why she was there. The first few hours were filled with introductions, training, and paperwork. Everyone she met was professional, but Emily still felt like she was waiting for someone to realize she did not belong. That feeling followed her for years. The feeling that one mistake would prove everyone right. During lunch, she sat alone near a quiet window and looked at the city below. She opened her phone and saw a picture of Noah smiling. A small smile appeared on her face. "We are doing this," she whispered. She did not notice that a few floors above, Alexander Hayes was looking through the same company reports that mentioned her name. But this time he was not reading as a CEO. He was thinking as the person who had sat beside her on that airplane. His assistant entered the office with an update. Emily Carter officially started today. Alexander nodded. Good. His assistant hesitated. "Mr. Hayes, may I ask something?" "What is it?" "Why are you personally following this case?" Alexander looked toward the window. It was a question he had asked himself many times. The answer was not simple. He had helped many people through company programs. He had signed checks, approved projects, supported organizations. But Emily was different because she never asked him for anything. She did not know his name. She did not know his influence. She simply treated him like a person. "Because talent should not disappear just because life becomes difficult," he finally said. His assistant nodded and left. Later that afternoon, Emily attended her first team meeting. She listened carefully as managers discussed upcoming projects. Then someone asked for ideas on improving customer communication. Emily hesitated before speaking. In the past, she would have stayed quiet. She had learned that being invisible sometimes felt safer. But something changed. She shared an idea she had developed from her previous experience. The room became quiet for a moment. Then one of the managers smiled. "That is actually a very good point." Emily looked surprised. It was a small sentence. But to her, it felt like someone had opened a window in a room that had been closed for years. After work, she picked up Noah from daycare and held him close. "Mommy had a good day," she told him. "A really good day." That evening, Emily received a message from the company welcoming new employees. At the bottom of the message was a name she recognized. Alexander Hayes. She froze for a moment. The same name from the airplane. The same man who had held Noah when she felt like she was failing. She searched the name online. The results appeared instantly. Photos, articles, headlines. Alexander Hayes, founder and CEO of Hayes Innovations. One of the most successful entrepreneurs in the country. Emily sat quietly, staring at the screen. Suddenly, every detail made sense. The confidence. The expensive watch. The way people looked. at him when he entered a room. He had not been just a kind stranger. He had been someone with more power than she could imagine. But what surprised her most was not his success. It was remembering that he never used it to make her feel small. He had simply helped. And now, as Emily looked at his picture on her phone, she wondered one thing. Why would a man who had everything choose to notice someone who felt like she had nothing? She did not know the answer yet. But soon, she would discover that Alexander Hayes was carrying his own hidden emptiness, and their unexpected connection was about to reveal a truth neither of them saw coming. Emily Carter spent the next few days trying to understand the strange turn her life had taken. A month ago, she was counting every dollar before buying groceries. Now she was sitting in a bright office surrounded by people who respected her ideas and trusted her experience. But one question remained in her mind. Why had Alexander Hayes helped her without expecting anything in return? She saw him for the first time since discovering his identity, when she entered a conference room for a company meeting. Alexander stood near the front of the room, speaking with a group of executives. He looked different from the man on the airplane. Not because he had changed, but because she finally saw the world around him. People listened when he spoke. Employees respected his decisions. His name carried weight everywhere. Yet when his eyes met hers, Emily saw the same person who had gently held Noah during that difficult flight. Alexander noticed her hesitation and gave a small smile. "Emily, I hope your first few days have been going well." She nodded. "They have. Thank you." There was a moment of silence between them. Emily wanted to say so many things. She wanted to thank him again. She wanted to ask why he never told her who he was. But before she could speak, another executive entered the room and the conversation moved forward. Later that afternoon, Alexander invited Emily for a brief conversation. Not in his large corner office. Not behind a massive desk. Instead, they sat in a quiet meeting room where they could speak as two people. "I know you found out who I am," Alexander said. Emily looked down. "I did. I should have told you." She shook her head. "Maybe. But I understand why you did not." Alexander looked surprised. "You do." Emily smiled slightly. "Because if I knew you were a billionaire CEO, I probably would have felt even more uncomfortable accepting your help." That answer made him laugh softly. "You are probably right." The conversation became easier after that. Emily asked about the company. Alexander asked about Noah. Neither of them noticed how natural it felt. Then Alexander became quiet. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "On the plane, you said people do not see the mother behind the crying baby." Emily nodded. "I remember. Do you believe people can change how they see others?" The question felt deeper than it appeared. Emily thought for a moment. "I think people change when someone gives them a reason to look closer." Alexander looked away, absorbing her words. He had spent years surrounded by people who wanted something from him. Business partners wanted opportunities. Investors wanted results. Strangers wanted attention. But Emily had never looked at him as a CEO. She looked at him as a person. Meanwhile, Emily began noticing something about Alexander too. Behind the confidence was someone who seemed strangely alone. His office was impressive, but it lacked warmth. There were no family photos. No personal memories. No signs of a life outside work. "You built all of this," Emily said one evening after a company event. "But do you ever stop and enjoy it?" Alexander smiled faintly. "I used to think success meant never stopping. And now?" He looked toward the city lights. "Now I am starting to wonder what I missed while I was busy building everything." Emily did not have an answer. Sometimes the people who looked like they had everything were carrying empty spaces no one could see. And as their unexpected friendship grew, both of them began to realize something important. They had met because of a difficult moment. But they were staying because, for the first time in years, they felt truly understood. Months passed, and the small moments that once seemed impossible slowly became part of Emily Carter's everyday life. She still arrived early for work. She still packed Noah's favorite snacks every morning. She still checked her schedule carefully because being a mother was the most important responsibility she had ever known. But now she no longer felt invisible. She had a place where her ideas mattered. She had co-workers who respected her. And she had someone who reminded her that kindness could appear in the most unexpected places. Alexander Hayes also changed in ways that surprised everyone around him. The CEO who once spent every waking hour focused on meetings and numbers began making time for things he had ignored for years. He started leaving the office before midnight. He attended company events that were not connected to business deals. He listened more. Not because he wanted to appear different, but because he finally understood that success was not only measured by what you built. It was also measured by what you gave attention to. One afternoon, Emily visited Alexander's office to discuss a project. She noticed something different immediately. On the corner of his desk was a small framed photo. It was not a business award. It was not a company achievement. It was a picture of Noah smiling during a company family event. Emily looked at it and smiled. "You kept that." Alexander glanced at the photo. "He made everyone in that room happier." Emily laughed softly. "You know he does that everywhere." Alexander smiled. "I believe you." There was a comfortable silence between them. A silence that did not feel empty, felt familiar. Over time, Emily learned more about the man behind the company. She learned that Alexander had spent years chasing achievements because he believed being needed was the same as being loved. She learned that he had forgotten how to slow down and simply be present. And Alexander learned something from Emily too. He learned that strength did not always look like confidence in a boardroom. Sometimes strength looked like a mother carrying groceries home after a long shift. Sometimes courage sounded like a tired voice saying, "We will be okay." One evening, Alexander visited a community center, where Hayes Innovations had started a new support program for working parents. Emily was there with Noah, helping other families understand the resources available to them. Alexander watched from a distance for a moment. He saw Emily talking with parents who felt the same fear she once carried. He saw the way she listened without judgment. She was not helping people because she had everything figured out. She was helping because she remembered what it felt like to need someone. Later, as they walked outside together, Alexander looked at the city lights. "Do you ever think about that night on the airplane?" he asked. Emily smiled. "Sometimes." "If you had not been sitting there, do you think anything would have changed?" Emily looked at Noah, who was holding her hand. "I think some moments find us when we need them most." Alexander nodded quietly. He had built companies. He had created opportunities. He had changed the lives of thousands of employees. But the most important change in his life came from a tired mother who never asked him for anything. She simply reminded him what it meant to care. Emily once believed her world had become smaller after becoming a single mother. She thought every closed door meant her story was ending. But she discovered something different. Sometimes life does not close a door to punish you. Sometimes it closes one to guide you toward a place you never imagined. Alexander Hayes once believed he had everything money could buy. But Emily Carter showed him something no fortune could purchase. A reason to slow down. A reason to care. A reason to remember that behind every person is a story worth seeing. And sometimes, one unexpected moment is enough to change two lives forever.